Hello, Cinnia. How are
Hello,
you?
Douglas. How are you? I'm good, sir.
Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Your book was called Confessions of a Helmet-Free Childhood, and I really love the subtitle, which was True-ish Tales of an Analog Upbringing. You and I got to be around the same age then,
Well,
because
the polite way to ask that is, what year did you graduate high school?
well, I was going to say I was single digits in the 60s. I was a teenager in the 70s.
Okay.
And
Well, I was born in 1960 and I graduated from high school in 1978.
oh, okay. Well, you know what? You're older than me then
There
by
you
two
go.
by 2 years.
Okay.
But I got to admit, you look better. But anyways, okay. So we are the same generation then.
Certainly.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Well, you know why that's important? Because if we reference pop culture, we're on the same page. You know.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about your childhood. Were you an army brat that you moved around
I
so much
wasn't
like
an
that?
army brat, but my dad was in finance, and you may have known kids like this because of a certain era. When he got another job, we got transferred a lot, and so
Yeah.
the new company would absorb the cost of the move. So I ended up going to five different grade schools and three different high schools, which was tough as a kid, but I have to tell
Oh,
you, really
yeah.
helped me as an adult because I have no problem walking into a room of strangers because that's basically what I was doing every 2.5 years.
You didn't feel. How many times? Let me ask you this: how many times have you moved as an adult?
Oh, well, I went to school in Washington, D.C., moved back to Chicago just in time for the steel recession of 82. Good timing. And then I moved out to California where the consumer electronics thing was happening. And it was interesting. It was a heady time to have a job in marketing because these companies were just taking off. And I probably had like six different apartments because Los Angeles is 70 miles wide and commuting is a thing. So I lived in Hermosa Beach, I lived in West Hollywood, I lived in Long Beach. And so because you wanted to shorten that commute, that was a quality of life issue in Los Angeles.
Okay, because kids that I've known that were moved around a lot as children, once they became adults, they tended to like find one spot and stay there for the rest of their life because
I
they
would
had
agree.
this sense of not having any roots, you
I
know?
think it was more so for my kids. I mean, I moved around, and also public relations, you have a lot of changing and you want to stay flexible. But once we had kids, yeah, we stayed put. My kids went to the same school, kindergarten through fifth grade, and then ascended to the same middle school, high school blend. So they were in the same school, sixth grade through 12th grade. So they have friends that date back to kindergarten, even preschool. I don't have that. My longest running friend dates back from seventh grade in Ohio, but my kids have friends that have known them really for most of their lives.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I haven't moved that much. I didn't move too much as a kid. I have one friend from high school who is my producer that you're emailing with. He's still in Boston. I'm originally from Boston. I moved to
Okay.
Vegas 15 years ago. Um, so, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book? I'm dying to hear one of the. It's 13 essays according to your bio.
Right. What I said, well, as you clued into the truish tales of an analog upbringing, there's a famous saying, there's three sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth. So this is my best recollection. I thought when I wrote this book and it published in January of this year, I thought I would be in a cluster of 1970s look back kind of books. Well, some other things happened, and I think our focus shifted. But I thought this was a good time to take a look back. And what I would say that was unique about being a kid in the 60s and the 70s, it was sort of the combination of old fashioned fun and space age opportunities. I mean, I played jump rope and I rode my bike and I played with our
Yeah.
cat or our gerbils or somebody's dog. But also we were talking, we saw man land on the moon. We had microwave ovens and calculators and we were told to learn the metric system and computer programming. So I really kind of think it was a unique time to be a kid, because we had those parents who said, go out and play, and you just walked out the door and they only had a vague idea of where you were headed, which my kids never had. And at the same time, all these changes were happening, and I think we had a very exciting childhood.
Do you think the technology, this is kind of a psychological question, but do you think technology has advanced so quickly that mankind's ability to digest it isn't there? And we're seeing the results of that now with all of the craziness in the
Well,
world.
I think it's a generational thing. I mean, I think what our kids are going through, what we went through as kids, also happened in the Industrial Revolution. I think when things start changing fast, there's both shiny object syndrome, that you're like, yeah, this is cool, I want to know about it, and also grieving what you're losing. I argue that one of the greatest blessings of our life was that TV, although it was there, was not 24 hours. When I told my kids that the TV day ended with the national anthem and a test pattern, they're like, what?
Yeah, what's
You know,
that?
you couldn't turn on the TV at 2 o'clock in the morning. There was nothing there. There was
Yeah.
just a pattern. And but I remember my sister and I, we wanted to have a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and we wanted to have a CB radio. Kids want to grab onto the new thing. And then I watched my kids, kind of come up with video games and social media and Facebook. And so I think there's this thing that as a parent, you kind of look and go like, oh yeah, but that's cool, but you're missing out on ABC. Well, I'm sure my children as parents will have the same experience, that their kids are going to glom onto whatever it is, and they'll be like, really? You want to do that? Because like when I was a kid, so I think it is getting faster.
True.
I think the speed,
Yeah.
I think the pace is getting faster. I certainly sense it professionally, that there's, especially with COVID, and we've all had to become Zoom and Skype masters in short order.
Right. I'm wondering though if like our grandkids are gonna, when they're parents, they're gonna have, robot nannies, and it's gonna be like that. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like, I got to tell you, I think with anything, there's some things that really make your life better. I mean, I remember the handheld blow dryer was a life changer for me, but also like the garage door opener. I'm one of 4 girls, and if it was raining, my mom would push out who was oldest to go run and get the garage door and open it. I mean, does that sound like so old ago? But so there were certain things, I never want to be a technophobe, but I also think, I think there's something to be said for having both old school and new school knowledge.
Well, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution, and I have to admit that if I lived back then and had to cook on a wood stove, I wouldn't be too happy about it. But then, they didn't know any better.
Well,
But when
I would want to arrive after the introduction of antibiotics. I don't think life before antibiotics was a good time.
Absolutely good point. How many people died of typhoid fever back then?
Unnecessarily.
Yeah, exactly. So, what was one of the, give us one of your essays. Did you actually give one?
Yeah, no, well, I think the thing, again, let me just give a little background of the shape of it. I wanted to do a series of essays because my background is public relations marketing. I've written for everybody. I wanted to write for myself, but I didn't want to do a novel. I thought having a series of semi-chronological order essays, and they're all sort of self-contained. So I have things like I destroyed my sister's bike. I evaded a math test by faking illness. I stole somebody's fireworks. And if you read the 13 chapters, you're like, oh my God, this girl was a sociopath. Well, I wasn't. I was a pretty good little kid, but nobody would read a book that, I did my homework, brushed my teeth, and went to bed on time. That's a bit of a snore of a book. So I kind of I grabbed these stories that I thought were certainly experiences that I had, but also very universal in appeal.
Okay. You also mentioned the moon landing. Did you sit around with your family all huddled in front of the TV watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon?
I don't have recollection of the first moonwalk because I think that was in the summertime, so I wouldn't have been in school. But I do remember being in a gym outside of Minneapolis, and we were all sitting on the linoleum floor with this crappy black and white television set on sort of a TV stand.
Oh,
And there were
yeah.
probably 300 kids in the gym watching a 17-inch screen television. Okay. And it was really blurry anyhow. It was like looking through aquarium water. And, the teachers were all in rapture. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is happening. And we're kind of like, well, it's cool. I don't have to do math problems, but I'd rather be out on the playground. I mean, I had a sense of its importance, but I don't remember that as other things that I remember.
You know what I've noticed, speaking of TV size, you know what I've noticed is that the younger the person is, the smaller the device is that they will use as their primary viewing device.
That's interesting.
I've noticed that people our age, if we're at home and we want to watch a movie, we want it on the biggest screen that we got in the house. Big flat screen TV in the living room, whatever. The kids, 15 and under, will have no problem to watch a 2.5 hour movie on a phone.
Right.
And to me, I can't watch a movie on a phone.
I think the other thing I've noticed generationally is that we were a generation of collectors. You either had a Hot Wheel collection or you had a record collection or,
Yeah.
I don't know, Hello Kitty collection, whatever. My kids are not collectors. And also, I mean, as a teenager, your album collection was, something of reverence. I mean, and when I went to college, the first thing you did was check out somebody else's album collection. What are they? Because it was sort of spoke to their taste level and what they were into. And how we have shed our music collection. I mean, because I had 45s, I had LPs. I remember 8 tracks, cassettes, then CDs. CDs never scratch. Not really. And then we once Napster changed all of that. And I think that, my kids will have playlists and things, but they don't physically collect music. I mean, there is sort of a throwback to vinyl. My son has certain vinyl albums that he really likes, but that is not the focus of his collection.
Well, do you think MP3 files count as a collection?
Well, what's I guess it is, but what's lost in the shuffle is the album art. I was a huge Yes fan, and Roger Dean albums were something I couldn't wait to see. And then also, the albums got very audacious. I mean, they were pushing that. I mean, Sticky Fingers was like, I was probably in middle school and was like, holy moly, that's quite a cover.
Yeah, and then what's the Who one where they're all peeing on that?
Oh, yeah. Who's Next, I think that was it, on the Monument.
Next?
Yeah. That was pretty shocking at the time. So I mean, as far as the technology thing, I think that it's also a matter of available brain space. I mean, when you're a kid, you have hours to sit on your bed and figure out your iPhone. Whereas if you're a working grown up, you learn what you need to know to get through that meeting or the project or whatever. And I joke with my kids, I've forgotten more software programs than they've learned yet because things kept changing. And I think that's important. But I think the other thing is you should know how to change a tire. You should be able to, replace a fuse in a fuse box. There's some things that when the lights go out and the tire goes flat, you better know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. Are your parents still alive?
Yes, they are.
How do they fare with computers and phones and things?
My dad was a bit spoiled because he was of that generation who always had a secretary who did stenography, and then he would write something in longhand and it would be magically typewritten and sent off to wherever. My mother was a real estate agent, and so she had to get her arms around that. But I think they're a little confounded by the whole Zoom thing. And in fairness to them, there's a lot of compatibility things you have to navigate. And if it's not your first language, it takes up. But, my mom, has charities that she works for and stuff, and she has to come up with reports and attach them to an email and all that sort of thing. So I think it's a function of what your demands are. But we were always a family that had the new, we had CB radio, we had a reel-to-reel tape deck. My dad brought home a really fancy Texas Instrument calculator, and we thought it was fantastic. You could push a button, find the square root of something, forget about it.
God, those things were expensive when they first came out.
Very expensive. And there was, remember the big debate, can you use it on an exam?
Right.
Did you have the mental chops to do the equation, or could you allow yourself to use the calculator? Because it was argued if you didn't know the equation, you couldn't plug it in right, so you wouldn't get the answer right anyhow. So you had to understand the concept in order to use the calculator. But that was a big deal.
Sure it was. And now they give them away in cereal boxes. because they're worth
Yeah, oh,
absolutely
I know.
nothing.
Time magazine, and you get a $10 calculator. It's interesting. My daughter
Yeah.
just went on a road trip from Chicago to Seattle, and of course they were going to lean on GPS. And I said, "That's cool until you get to like Nothing Fork, Montana, and there is no cell tower. Then what, my love?" And so I called AAA and had a triptych. Remember those? And the tour books I'll send, and they were astounded by this. I said, "You're really going to be happy to have that paper map when you make the wrong turn and you're off the beaten path, and cellular towers fail you."
Exactly. We have to wrap this up. We've actually gone
Sure.
over our time. That just blew right by very quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, sure did.
Thank you so much for coming on. How is your book doing?
Nicely. I'm both on Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and I would argue because things are so intense, one, people are going back to reading, and I think people want something light. There's plenty of very heavy political nonfiction out there
Oh,
right
yeah.
now, so
Yeah.
Confessions of a Helmet-Free Childhood is a nice break.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
This
This
was
was fun
great.
talking
Thank
to
you.
you. Best of luck. Do you have a website you want to quickly
Sure.
plug?
If you go to www.helmet-free-childhood.com, and that has a sample chapter, a link to both Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and the content, the chapter list, and some reviews. So if you look at the website, you'll have a pretty good sense of whether this is a book for you.
Okay. And also, you're on our featured authors section on our website as well.
Thank you. I
So
appreciate that.
people can come on there and check you out as well. Thank you again.